People often tell you that love is blind. They tell you that finding the right person is a necessary leap of faith. You're supposed to close your eyes, jump into the absolute unknown, and trust that the net will catch you. They forget to mention a crucial, deadly detail. When your only son is blindly jumping into a net made entirely of razor wire, you have to be the one to rip his eyes open, even if the harsh light burns his soul. I did not expose my future daughter-in-law in a sudden, dramatic outburst. I did not scream. I collected the pieces, small, quiet, highly toxic pieces, and I methodically build a cage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Victor Sterling. I am 62 years old. I operate a commercial real estate and development firm out of Boston, Massachusetts. We are based in the Seaport District. My family has done incredibly well. I built this business from nothing in the brutal winters of the 1980s. I poured concrete. I navigated corrupt zoning boards. I built skyscrapers. Today, our operational portfolio is the kind of massive physical reality that commands absolute respect. But the money was never the actual point. Family was the point. Always family. We are a quiet, fiercely loyal bloodline. My wife passed away 7 years ago. She left me with one primary directive: protect our son, Nathan. Nathan is 34 years old. He is a brilliant architectural engineer. He designs buildings with flawless structural integrity. But in his personal life, he lacks my ruthless edge. He is kind. He is trusting. He sees the absolute best in everyone. In the corporate world, that is a fatal vulnerability. In love, it is a death sentence. He had dated seriously twice before. Both times ended quietly. Two adults realizing their blueprints for the future simply did not align. Then, he met Serena. Serena was 32. Nathan met her at a high-end charity gala for Boston Children's Hospital. Within 3 months, my son was completely, hopelessly gone over this woman. I had never seen him so embarrassingly happy. She walked in my house for Sunday dinner wearing a minimalist, tailored Chanel dress. It easily cost $4,000. She was radiant, polished, flawless. She drank my vintage 1998 Cabernet Sauvignon with the casual ease of a woman who had spent her entire life in country clubs. She told me her name was Serena Kensington. She claimed she was the only daughter of a wealthy tech family from the West Coast. She spoke eloquently about summers in Napa Valley. She dropped names of exclusive boarding schools. She carried herself with a particular kind of aristocratic polish that was designed to completely disarm a wealthy family like mine. Nathan was mesmerized. I sat at the head of my heavy mahogany dining table. I watched her. I'm a man of metrics. I understand foundations. And the foundation of Serena Kensington was too perfect. It lacked the natural, rough friction of human reality. When I asked her specific questions about her father's tech firm, she deflected flawlessly. She pivoted the conversation back to Nathan's architectural awards. She was incredibly warm. She was charming. She made my son feel like a king. But her stories had no load-bearing walls. For 11 months, she absorbed herself into our lives. Nathan proposed on the private rooftop of the Newberry Hotel. A flawless 3-carat diamond ring. She said yes with tears in her eyes. My son was ecstatic. He was planning a future, and I sat in my study, staring at the shadows, feeling a cold, deep instinct telling me that the entire structure of his happiness was built on a rotting, toxic lie. I didn't say anything. I stayed quiet. I did not raise a single objection, because a good hunter never spooks the prey before the trap is fully set. Asters, please find a comfortable seat. This story is going to take you somewhere very dark and very calculated. Hit that like button and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Asterisk. I did not hire a private investigator immediately. I simply made a phone call. At 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, I sat in my home office. The Boston fog was thick outside my window. I dialed the private, encrypted number of Silas Vance. Silas is 58 years old. He is my chief legal counsel. He is a ruthless legal shark who has navigated the treacherous waters of corporate espionage for 2 decades. Silas, I said, My voice was entirely void of emotion. I need a comprehensive structural analysis on my future daughter-in-law. Serena Kensington? Silas asked. His voice was a low rumble. Looking for anything specific, Victor? I am looking for the truth, I commanded. Dig past the social media. Pull the financial records. Pull the tax histories. I want her entire life dismantled and laid bare on my desk. 48 hours later, Silas walked into my office. He did not offer a polite greeting. He simply dropped a thick, heavy manila folder directly onto my desk. The sharp smack echoed in the quiet room. The Kensington identity is a ghost, Victor, Silas said coldly. She legally changed her name 3 years ago in California. Before 2021, Serena Kensington did not exist. I opened the folder. Her real name is Samantha Hayes, Silas continued. She does not come from Silicon Valley money. She comes from Fall River, Massachusetts, about an hour south of here. Her parents are not tech billionaires. They are blue-collar workers, and they are currently drowning in debt. I stared at the stark black text on the background report. The elegant, aristocratic illusion completely shattered. She was a high society imposter. She had spent a decade reinventing herself, tailoring her identity to climb a social ladder she had absolutely no right to be on. She targeted my son. She targeted my family's wealth. Do they know she's getting married to the Sterling family? I asked. Silas shook his head. According to the digital footprint, she severed all contact with them exactly 3 years ago, right before she changed her name and moved to Boston. I closed the folder. The sorrow for my son's broken heart was entirely eradicated. It was instantly replaced by a pure, glacial wrath. I did not tell Nathan. If I told him now, his soft heart would demand an explanation from her. She would spin a sympathetic lie. She would cry. She would manipulate him into believing she lied out of shame or fear. I needed undeniable, absolute proof. I put on a dark wool overcoat. I left my office. I got into my armored Mercedes S-Class. I drove south on Route 24. The drive to Fall River was a descent into a completely different world. I left the gleaming glass skyscrapers of Boston behind. I entered a town of decaying textile mills and fading infrastructure. I followed the GPS to a narrow, cracked street lined with modest, aging houses. I parked my Mercedes in front of a small, weather-beaten home. The paint was peeling off the porch. A rusted Ford pickup truck sat in the driveway. This was the grand ancestral estate of Serena Kensington. I stepped out into the biting autumn wind. I walked up the cracked concrete path. I rang the doorbell. An older man opened the door. He was in his late 60s. He wore a faded flannel shirt and stained work boots. His hands were thick and calloused from decades of hard physical labor. His face was lined with deep, heavy exhaustion. He looked at my tailored suit and my expensive watch. He squinted in that cautious way people do when a wealthy stranger stands on their porch. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked. His voice was rough, hesitant. "My name is Victor Sterling," I said, keeping my tone perfectly civil. "I am looking for Arthur and Martha Hayes. I am here regarding your daughter, Samantha." Arthur Hayes went entirely rigid. The blood drained completely from his weathered face. He did not look angry. He looked terrified. "Martha," his voice broke. He turned toward the dark hallway. "Martha, come here." A woman appeared. She wiped her hands on a faded dish towel. She had kind, tired eyes. When she heard I was there about her daughter, she began to visibly tremble. They invited me inside. The house smelled of cheap bleach and old coffee. The living room was modest. Worn furniture, faded carpets, but the mantel above the fireplace was completely filled with framed photographs. School pictures, a high school graduation photo. It was Serena, unpolished, real, standing between Arthur and Martha. Arthur's calloused arm was wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Martha's face was glowing with absolute pride. These are not toxic, abusive parents. These were people who deeply loved their child. We sat at a small kitchen table. Martha poured me a mug of cheap drip coffee. Her hand was shaking violently. The true story came out carefully, methodically. Arthur had worked in a manufacturing plant for 35 years. Martha cleaned houses. They had scraped and bled for every single penny to put Samantha through a decent state college. They wanted her to have a better life. But when Samantha graduated and moved to the city, the ambition turned into a malignant cancer. She changed, Arthur whispered. He stared down his rough hands. She started hanging around wealthy crowds. She was embarrassed of us. She told us we didn't know how to dress, how to speak. Then came the wedding demand. 3 years ago, Samantha had briefly been engaged to another wealthy man in California. She had come to her parents with a demand. She wanted $150,000 to fund a spectacular, elite wedding. She wanted them to pay for a lavish country club venue, so she wouldn't look cheap in front of her new friends. I told her we didn't have it, Arthur said. A single tear slipped down his rough cheek. I offered her $10,000. It was our entire emergency savings. It was everything we had in the world. Martha let out a quiet, heart-wrenching sob. She slid a small cardboard box across the table. She told us we were useless. Martha cried, her voice cracking with agonizing grief. She told us that if we couldn't fund her lifestyle, we were not fit to be in her life. She left that night. I looked into the cardboard box. Inside were dozens of envelopes, Christmas cards, birthday cards, letters. Every single one of them was sealed. Every single one of them had a heavy red stamp across the front. Returned to sender. Serena had systematically erased the people who gave her life simply because they could not afford the admission ticket to her fake reality. My heart turned to absolute stone. Mr. Sterling, Arthur asked quietly, "Why are you here? Is Samantha in trouble?" I looked at the broken parents sitting across from me. They had spent 3 years in an agonizing purgatory, waiting for a daughter who viewed them as disposable trash. "Arthur, Martha," I said softly, "your daughter is currently engaged to my son. She is planning to marry into my family next month." Martha gasped. She covered her mouth with her hands. "She told my son that her parents were dead," I stated. The lie hung in the kitchen air like a physical poison. "She told my family that she comes from massive wealth. She has built an entire life on top of your erasure." Arthur closed his eyes. The devastation was absolute. I did not offer empty sympathy. I offered justice. "I'm hosting a private engagement dinner for them next week," I said. My voice was completely steady. "I want you both to be there. I will send a private car to pick you up. I will buy your suits and dresses. I want you to walk into that room and reclaim your existence." Arthur looked at me. He saw the cold, unyielding fire in my eyes. He nodded once. "We will be there," Arthur whispered. I stood up. I walked out of that small, tragic house. I got back into my Mercedes. I turned the ignition. I drove back to Boston with a singular, terrifying focus. Serena thought she could play a high-stakes psychological game with the Sterling family. She thought she could manipulate my son into handing her the keys to an empire. She severely underestimated the architect of that empire. I wasn't just going to stop the wedding. I was going to completely, irreversibly demolish the entire fake reality she had spent a decade building. And I was going to trap her inside the collapsing structure. I drove back to Boston in complete, absolute silence. The rhythmic hum of the Mercedes engine was the only sound in the cabin. The sky above Interstate 93 turned a bruised, heavy purple as the sun set. My mind was a steel trap. I was compartmentalizing the profound, sickening betrayal I had just uncovered. There would be time to mourn the woman my son thought he loved. There would be time to address the shattered pieces of his heart. But right now, I needed absolute unwavering focus. In the construction business, the most dangerous phase of a demolition is not the explosion. It is the silent, meticulous placement of the dynamite. If you rush, the building collapses on top of you. If you wait, you control exactly how it falls. I arrived at my estate in the Seaport District. The penthouse was quiet. I poured myself 2 fingers of Macallan 25. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the harbor. I did not call Nathan. The first rule of any hostile negotiation: the man who reacts first almost always loses. Let them finish the lie. A half-told lie is just an argument. A fully told lie is a legally binding confession. My phone buzzed on the marble counter at exactly 8:15 p.m. It was Nathan. I let it ring 3 times. I took a slow sip of my scotch. I cleared my throat. ensuring my voice carried the warm, supportive tone of a proud father. I answered. "Nathan," I said smoothly. "How was your evening?" "Dad." Nathan's voice was breathless. He sounded ecstatic, vibrating with a naive, pure joy. "I have incredible news. You're not going to believe this." "Tell me," I replied. "Serena's parents," he rushed out. "They are coming to Boston." Serena finally reached out to them. They had a massive, emotional breakthrough on the phone. They apologized for everything in the past. They want to heal the rift before the wedding. They are flying in from Silicon Valley this weekend. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. Silicon Valley. Just 4 hours ago, I was sitting in a decaying kitchen in Fall River, watching a retired factory worker cry over a box of returned birthday cards. Her real parents were 70 miles away, drowning in debt, which meant the people flying in from California were not her parents. Serena was not just a liar. She was a master architect of deception. She was actively building the next floor of her elaborate illusion. She had realized that my family, the Sterling bloodline, would never fully accept a marriage without meeting the in-laws. The pressure was mounting, so she did what any cornered, desperate fraudster would do. She hired actors. "That is wonderful news, Nathan," I said. My voice did not waver, not a single fraction of a decibel. "I know how much this means to Serena. And to you." "It means everything, Dad," Nathan said. "They want to meet you. They want to do a formal dinner this Saturday night." Serena is looking at booking a table at Grill 23. "Absolutely not," I intervened smoothly. "This is a momentous occasion, Nathan. 2 families coming together. We do not do this in a crowded, noisy steakhouse." I paused, letting my authority settle over the line. "I will host the dinner," I commanded politely. "I will book the private wine cellar room at the Federalist in Beacon Hill. It is exclusive. It is completely private. Tell Serena I insist on taking care of her parents properly." "Dad, that's incredibly generous," Nathan said, deeply moved. "Thank you. Serena is going to be so thrilled." "I'm sure she will be," I whispered. I hung up the phone. I took the final sip of my scotch. Serena thought she was playing chess against a soft, old widower. She had absolutely no idea. She had just handed the executioner the exact dimensions of the chopping block. The next morning, Silas Vance sat across from me in my office. "She's bringing in ringers, Silas," I stated. I handed him a piece of paper with the name Serena had provided to Nathan. "Richard and Eleanor Kensington. I need to know exactly who these people are. I need their real names. And I need to know exactly how much she is paying them." Silas took the paper. His dark eyes gleamed with a predatory thrill. "Give me 24 hours, Victor." He only needed 12. By Wednesday evening, Silas dropped a new, sleek black dossier onto my desk. "Richard and Eleanor Kensington do not exist," Silas said, leaning against the doorframe. "Their real names are Richard and Eleanor Vance. No relation to me, thank God. They are a pair of high-end, sophisticated grifters operating out of a rented condo in Los Angeles. They specialize in corporate confidence scams and elite social fraud. They look like old money, but they are currently drowning in over $200,000 of credit card debt." I opened the file. High-resolution surveillance photos showed the couple. Silver hair, tailored suits, perfect veneers. They looked exactly like the kind of wealthy, polished tech investors Serena needed them to be. "How is she paying them?" I asked. "Serena doesn't have the capital to afford top-tier con artists." Silas smiled. A cold, terrifying smile. "She doesn't have the capital yet, Victor." I pulled the digital banking logs from the joint account Nathan set up for the wedding in their new house. Silas pointed to a highlighted financial document. "Nathan deposited $2 million into that joint account last week as a wedding gift," Silas explained. "Yesterday, Serena drafted a post-dated wire transfer, scheduled to clear exactly 48 hours after the wedding ceremony. The destination is a Cayman Islands shell company registered to Richard Vance." I stared at the staggering number on the page. $1 million. She promised them $1 million from my son's money to play the role of her parents for a single weekend. It was an investment, a $1 million theatrical performance to secure a lifetime of unlimited access to the Sterling family fortune. "Cancel the wire transfer?" Silas asked, his hand hovering over his phone. "No, y comanda instantly." Do not touch the money. Do not alert the bank. If you freeze the transfer now, they will scatter. We let the wire transfer sit exactly where it is. It is our absolute, irrefutable proof of criminal conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I picked up my secure burner phone. I dialed a number I had acquired in Fall River. Arthur Hayes answered. He sounded exhausted. Arthur, it is Victor Sterling, I said quietly. The dinner is set for this Saturday night at 7 p.m. in Beacon Hill. I am sending a private black car to pick you and Martha up at exactly 4 p.m. Mr. Sterling, Arthur's voice trembled. We don't have the right clothes for a place like that. We don't want to embarrass you. You will not embarrass me, Arthur, I stated. My voice was a bedrock of absolute certainty. My personal tailor will be arriving at your house tomorrow morning. He will fit you for a bespoke suit. He will bring Martha an elegant evening gown. You're the parents of the bride. You will walk into that room looking exactly like the people who raised her. A heavy, emotional pause held the line. Are you ready for this, Arthur? I asked. I have been ready for 3 years, the old mechanic whispered. The pieces were in place. The structural integrity of the trap was completely flawless. Saturday night in Beacon Hill is exactly what it should be. Exclusive, quiet, intentionally intimidating. The cobblestone streets were slick with a light autumn rain. The private wine cellar at the Federalist operates on a different frequency than the main restaurant. It is buried deep underground. Stone walls, low, amber candlelight. A massive, solid oak table sitting in the center of a room lined with $10,000 bottles of Bordeaux. It feels like a vault. Once the heavy wooden door closes, no one can hear you scream. I arrived at 6:30 p.m. I wore my sharpest charcoal suit. I stood at the head of the table. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I waited. They arrived precisely at 7 p.m. I heard Serena's laugh echoing down the stone corridor before the heavy door opened. That specific, curated social laugh. Half a note higher than her real voice. The laugh she used when she wanted to dominate a room before she even entered it. She walked in first. She wore a stunning, backless silk gown. Her hair was perfectly styled. Every detail was meticulously calculated to project massive generational wealth. Nathan walked beside her. He looked incredibly handsome, completely relaxed, blindly happy. Then came the actors. Richard entered with the easy, arrogant confidence of a man who had never once doubted his right to be in a room. Silver hair perfectly coiffed. A counterfeit Patek Philippe watch gleaming on his wrist. Eleanor followed, gracious and polished, wearing a string of heavy pearls at her collarbone. They were magnificent, genuinely, terrifyingly magnificent. If I did not have their criminal records sitting in my briefcase, I would have believed they owned half of Silicon Valley. Serena practically floated toward me. She kissed my cheek. Victor, Serena whispered warmly. This room is incredible. Thank you so much for hosting us. This means everything to me. I know it does, Serena, I replied. I smiled. It was a cold, perfectly dead smile. That is exactly why I arranged it. She heard a compliment. I meant something else entirely. Victor, it is an absolute honor, Richard said. He extended a manicured hand. His grip was firm, practiced. Serena has told us so much about the Sterling Empire. Your work in the Seaport District is legendary. Thank you, Richard, I said, shaking his hand. And I have heard fascinating things about your tech ventures out west. We sat down. The private waiter poured a 2010 Chateau Margaux. The 5-course dinner commenced. For the first 45 minutes, I watched a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Serena performed with a fluency that, under any other circumstance, I would have found genuinely impressive. She laughed at Richard's observations a half-beat too quickly. She referenced fabricated childhood memories with Eleanor. Trips to the Alps, summers in the Hamptons. Eleanor tracked along beautifully. She played the warm, slightly overbearing, wealthy mother to absolute perfection. Richard asked Nathan questions about structural engineering, acting exactly like a protective billionaire father vetting his future son-in-law. The entire table was a highly choreographed stage play. I ate my filet mignon. I laughed at the right moments. I poured the wine. I was, by every visible metric, a completely relaxed patriarch enjoying a joyous family union. But I was hunting. I started dropping traps. Small, hyper-specific questions designed to test the load-bearing capacity of their lives. "So, Richard," I said casually, setting my silver knife down. "I was actually out in Palo Alto last month, looking at a commercial property right off Sand Hill Road. I imagine your firm has significant holdings in that sector?" Richard did not flinch. "We do, Victor. Though the zoning laws out there are becoming increasingly draconian. We've been shifting more capital toward Austin." Flawless pivot. He had done his research. "Fascinating," I murmured. I turned to Eleanor. "And Eleanor, Serena tells me you are highly involved in the pediatric charities out in San Francisco. My late wife, Victoria, was very passionate about that. Which foundation do you primarily work with?" Eleanor smiled graciously. "Oh, the Bay Area Children's Coalition mostly. It takes up far too much of my time, but it is so rewarding. There is no Bay Area Children's Coalition. I made it up in my head exactly 4 seconds ago." "That is wonderful," I said. I picked up my wine glass. I looked directly at Serena over the rim of the crystal. She was glowing, victorious. She truly believed she had completely conquered the Sterling family. The trap was fully built. The steel jaws were open. She had just walked directly into the center and smiled. It was time to pull the lever. The waiter cleared the dessert plates. The ambient noise of the restaurant above us was completely muted by the thick stone walls. The heavy, polished oak door was closed. I reached into my breast pocket. My secure burner phone vibrated once. A text from my security detail waiting in the alleyway. "The package has arrived." I stood up slowly. I picked up my silver butter knife. I tapped it gently against my crystal wine glass. Asterisk clink, 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 asterisk. The crisp, sharp sound cut through the warm chatter. The table instantly settled. Serena looked up at me. She beamed a full, radiant, triumphant smile. She was expecting a grand, emotional toast. She was expecting me to officially welcome her into the Sterling billionaire dynasty. I let the heavy silence hold for just a fraction of a second longer than was socially comfortable. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," I began. My voice was calm, measured. It was the exact tone I used when dismantling a rival CEO in a boardroom. A dinner like this is not just a pleasant evening. It is a declaration. It is the foundation upon which two families merge. I looked slowly around the table, making deliberate eye contact with every single person. "My late wife taught our son that the people you bring to your table tell the world exactly who you are," I continued. My gaze locked onto Serena. "We do not take that lightly. The Sterling family requires absolute authenticity. We require the truth." Nathan smiled proudly. He had absolutely no idea what was happening. "So," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "I wanted to make absolutely certain that tonight, we had the real family at this table." I looked at the heavy oak door at the back of the wine cellar. I gave a single, sharp nod. The door was pushed open, and in walked Arthur and Martha Hayes. Arthur wore the bespoke navy suit my tailor had provided. It fit him perfectly. He stood tall. His calloused hands were clenched into tight fists at his sides. Martha wore a deep burgundy evening gown. She clutched a small clutch purse. Her chin was held high. She moved with the profound, quiet dignity of a woman who had decided she was absolutely not going to fall apart in public, no matter the cost. They walked directly into the center of the private room. They stood perfectly still. I was watching Serena's face. I had positioned myself specifically to watch her face. The color left her skin like a tide going out. Fussed, complete, absolute. Her perfectly painted lips parted. The crystal wine glass in her hand began to shake violently. The red wine sloshed over the rim, staining the pristine white tablecloth like fresh blood. I reached over, gently took the glass from her trembling fingers, and set it down. Nathan looked at the two strangers standing in the room. He was completely confused. "Dad, who are these people?" Serena's eyes darted frantically around the room. I could physically see her mind running rapid, desperate calculations. She was searching for the angle, the exit, the lie that could possibly save her from the collapsing building. "Nathan," her voice came out thin, breathy. Barely a sound at all. "I don't know who. I want to Fall River," I said quietly. I wasn't performing for the room. I was talking directly to her. 3 days ago, I continued, my voice as hard as cracked ice. I drove south on Route 24. I found a retired manufacturing worker with grease permanently stained into his hands. I told him my name, and he looked at me like he had seen a ghost. The room was a hell breath. The fake parents, Richard and Eleanor, sat completely paralyzed in their chairs. Your father worked 35 years on a factory floor. Samantha, I stated. I used her real name. It hit the room like a gunshot. Your mother cleaned houses for wealthy people, so you wouldn't have to. They put you through college with zero debt because they loved you. Nathan turned his head slowly. He looked at Serena. His eyes were wide with horrifying realization. Samantha? He whispered. They offered you $10,000 for your wedding, I said, my voice level and punishing. It was their entire life savings. And you told them that if they could not fund your fake, elite lifestyle, they did not exist. Victor, please, Serena choked out. A single tear ruined her perfect makeup. You don't understand the whole story. They were. I sat in their kitchen. I cut her off. My voice slammed shut like a steel vault door. I saw your prom photos on a faux brick mantle. I held the box of returned, sealed birthday cards. I saw the red stamps you put on them. I turned slowly to the actors. Richard and Eleanor were perfectly still. The fake Patek Philippe watch suddenly looked incredibly cheap on Richard's sweating wrist. Richard, Eleanor, I said. The polite warmth in my tone was entirely gone. Or should I say, the Vance grifters. Nathan gasped. He stood up from his chair, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I know exactly what she offered you, I stated, staring down the con artists. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the thick bank log. I threw it onto the center of the table. She offered you $1 million for my son's wedding fund to play this pathetic charade. The wire transfer is sitting in escrow, waiting to clear to your Cayman Island shell company. Eleanor closed her eyes. Richard slowly folded his linen napkin and placed it on the table. The universal gesture of a man who knows the gig is up and is calculating his prison sentence. That wire transfer is currently frozen by federal authorities, I announced. I'll let the absolute terror of the word federal sink into their bones. You're looking at 20 years for wire fraud and criminal conspiracy to defraud a trust. I turned back to Serena. She was hyperventilating. She was no longer a polished aristocrat. She was a cornered, desperate rat trapped in the rubble of her own design. You weaponized these actors to fill 2 empty chairs on a stage. I gestured toward Arthur and Martha, who were standing quietly by the door. But those are your real parents right there. Serena slowly looked up at Arthur and Martha. Martha did not yell. She did not scream. She just looked at her daughter with the specific, agonizing recognition of a woman who realizes the child she birthed does not exist anymore. Nathan backed away from the table. He looked at Serena as if she were a venomous snake. The brilliant architectural engineer finally saw the catastrophic structural failure of his relationship. He didn't yell. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the 3-carat diamond engagement ring he had given her, the ring she had handed back to him to get clean the day before. He didn't throw it. He gently placed it on the white linen tablecloth, right next to the spilled red wine. "We are done," Nathan whispered. His voice was completely broken, but absolute. "Do not ever contact me again." He walked over to my side of the table. He stood behind my shoulder. Serena looked around the stone vault. There were no more parts available. The cast had abandoned the stage. The illusion was permanently, irreversibly destroyed. I reached down and picked up my glass of sparkling water.